Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Nutritional Support for Popular Diets. My name is Susan Valakis and I'm the Training Development Coordinator at Now Foods, and as such I bring you these webinars on the third Thursday of each month. If you've missed any of them, you can find our replays on our website at nowfoods.com/webinars or on the Now Foods YouTube channel. Today's webinar will be presented by one of Now's very own, Amy Kozowski. Amy's presentation will focus on some of today's most popular diets as she identifies the benefits as well as the nutritional deficiencies in each of these diets. We solicited questions prior to this presentation, so today's webinar has been pre-recorded and there will be no Q&A following the webinar, but we do hope that all your questions will be answered in the presentation. And if you do have questions about the information presented, you'll see Amy's contact information at the end of the webinar. Now let me tell you a little bit about our presenter. Amy Kozowski is a scientist at Now Health Group, where she writes technical literature and label claims for nutritional products, and she is active in the product development process. Amy oversees regulatory and compliance activities with respect to marketing materials, and as a registered patent agent, she works alongside our legal team. She is also an Illinois state licensed dietitian nutritionist with 20 years of nutritional counseling experience. She has worked with both individuals and groups to educate them on nutritionally related issues. Amy earned her master's degree in nutritional biology from the University of Chicago, where she studied medical physiology, cellular and molecular biology, as well as molecular mechanisms of disease processes. And Amy has also been a certified personal trainer and has taught classes at the College of DuPage in the Nutrition for the Human Services Department. With that, I'd like to tell you that you are in for a webinar that is jam-packed with excellent information. So sit back and enjoy the presentation as we welcome Amy Kozowski.
Thanks, Sue, for that nice introduction, and thanks everyone for attending. Today we're going to talk about nutritional support for popular diets. Some of these diets you've heard a lot about, and some might be new to you. So let's just get started. First thing I'm going to talk about is the vegetarian diet, and then I'll go into low-carb diets, which include Atkins and keto diets. Pretty much everyone's probably heard of Paleo, and the Mediterranean diet, and maybe a less well-known one, intermittent fasting, which I think is becoming a little more popular. Another term for that is time-restricted eating, but time-restricted eating refers to a specific type of intermittent fasting, which I will get into later. First, vegetarian diet. Okay, the vegetarian diet's been around for a very long time, and a lot of people do vegetarian diets for ethical reasons. Some people do it for health reasons, and usually the most strict vegetarian diet is the vegan diet, which includes no animal products whatsoever. That includes honey, dairy, and eggs. Vegans typically will not have any type of animal product in their life, so they don't wear leather, and mostly vegans are vegan for ethical reasons, but I imagine there's other reasons why people do it. Another type of vegetarian diet is just no animal flesh, so no animals die, but it does allow dairy and eggs and honey and things like that. Another form of vegetarianism, which really isn't vegetarianism, but for whatever reason it gets included, is pesco-vegetarian, which it doesn't include any red meat or poultry, but does include seafood. So when I talk about these vegetarian diets, I'm really talking about the first two, vegan and vegetarian, but not typically the one that includes seafood. The benefits of vegetarian diets, which have been documented in scientific literature for many years, is that it does appear, people, lifelong vegetarians do have a lower risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. Also lower blood pressure, typically, in lifelong vegetarians. And you can start vegetarian diet, and you will eventually attain some of these lower risk factors. Vegetarian diets seem to be more ecologically sustainable because they use a lot less resources with respect to, like it just takes more energy and more land to support animal farms like cows and pigs and things. And the vegetarian diet is more ethical treatment of animals. Some strengths. Typically, a vegetarian diet is higher in fiber than other diets, very high fruit and vegetable content. So that means a lot of times that you get more polyphenols, antioxidants, phytonutrients from food. Also, it's lower in saturated fats and lower in animal proteins, which can be good if you have any type of kidney problems in your family history. Some weaknesses of the vegetarian diet. It can be low in many nutrients, which I will go over in a minute. It can be low in protein, but not necessarily. It can lack variety because people get into ruts with diets, and especially with a vegetarian diet, you have to watch out for lack of variety. People tend to eat the same things all the time. It can be hard to eat out in restaurants, so socially it could be difficult. Also, there's a lot of people who don't eat meat and don't eat any animal products, but eat a lot of junk food, and you have to watch out for that. Just because something's vegetarian doesn't mean that it's healthy. So for nutritional support, you have to make sure that you eat enough protein. The recommendation is about a little less than a gram per kilogram of body weight per day. I read some articles while I was preparing for this, and the studies show that vegetarians don't really have a problem getting enough protein. However, I do think it is important to be mindful of the types of proteins that you get, because from plants, there aren't a lot of complete protein sources, meaning they don't have all of the essential amino acids. But if you combine these different sources of protein, you can get enough of these essential amino acids. However, there are a couple of amino acids that you don't get from plants, and two of those would be taurine and carnitine. Now, these aren't essential amino acids, nor are they amino acids that are incorporated into proteins in the body, but they are important for different health reasons. One, taurine is very important for eyes. It's also important for maintaining osmotic balance, meaning that it helps balance water in between cells and within cells. So taurine is an important amino acid in the body. Carnitine is another amino acid. That's not really an amino acid, but carnitine helps transport fats from the outside the mitochondria to inside the mitochondria so that they can be used for energy production. And carnitine is an amino acid that's found in meat. Your body can make those two amino acids, by the way, but it just sometimes they become essentially conditionally essential, meaning that if your body's stressed or there's some other reason why your body's not getting enough of the things it needs to make those amino acids, you need to add those to your diet. And you can get those through vegetarian sources through supplementation, by the way. The other things that are really important for vegetarian diets are essential fatty acids. The two essential fatty acids are alpha-linoleic and linoleic acids, both of which can be obtained through plant sources. And alpha-linolenic acid, can be converted into EPA and DHA, both of which are omega-3s. Alpha-linolenic is an omega-3, and linoleic acid is an omega-6. Now, EPA and DHA can only be obtained through animal sources, mainly through fish, but also through grass-fed animals like cows, milk, and the meat can have DHA and EPA in them. And there's a catch to this. So even though you can make EPA and DHA from alpha-linolenic acid, the conversion rate is quite low. It's around 10% in humans. And that varies from person to person, of course. But you have to eat a lot of this to make enough of EPA and DHA to really get enough. Now, EPA and DHA are really important for inflammatory responses, and DHA in particular is really important for the brain and eye health. So it's really important to make sure you're getting those in your diet. And there are supplements of EPA and DHA that you can get from plant sources. They have algae-based EPA and DHA, just for instance. They tend to be a little more expensive, though, than the fish-based one. A vegetarian diet can be low in many minerals, including iron, zinc, iodine, and calcium. So iron is really important for making blood, right? You need iron to carry oxygen in your blood. Vegetarian diets are low in iron, and while you can get some iron from plant sources, it's not well absorbed. And typically when the plant sources that it comes from are high in phytic acid, which will inhibit the absorption of iron. And the same thing is true for zinc. So supplementing zinc and iron is a really good idea if you are a vegetarian and you're not getting enough. Now, with iron, you want to make sure that you're getting tested and that you're not getting too much iron, which is hard to do if you're a vegetarian anyway. So, on your annual blood test, just make sure that your hemoglobin count and your hematocrit and your iron levels are all normal. And if they are, then I guess you don't need to supplement with iron. But if they're on the low side, it might help you. Now, iodine, typically found in seafood, is not found in many plant sources except for maybe seaweed. So getting enough iodine is going to be important for your thyroid function. And calcium, which is typically found in your dairy foods, can be low in vegetarian diets. And again, the same issue with absorption applies from animal sources. So you want to make sure you get enough calcium. Now, for vitamins, B12 is not found in any any plant sources. Now, there are some arguments that it's found in spirulina, but it's not well absorbed if it is, and it's not a really good source of B12. So you really do need to supplement with B12 if you are a vegetarian. And again, that can be tested on an annual basis to make sure you're getting enough. And then I put in vitamin D, and especially D3. You'll notice that the vitamin D is in almost all of my recommendations because people aren't really getting enough. This is the sunshine vitamin, and you will make it in your body when you are exposed to sunshine. But with our lifestyles, we're inside a lot. We wear a lot of clothes when we go out, and so your only things are exposed, especially during the winter, are hands and face, but you can't make vitamin D in the winter anyway if you live in the northern latitudes. If you're living in the southern latitudes, it's not a big of an issue. But also, people wear sunscreen, and that will block your body's ability to make vitamin D. So it is really a good idea to supplement with vitamin D. Now, you can get it from plant sources, which is maybe mushrooms, and you get vitamin D2, which is called ergocalciferol. That is the plant source. And you can get it through supplements from vitamin D2. However, vitamin D3 really is the preferred form, and that's only made in animals. I have noticed, though, on the marketplace, there are coming out with some plant-sourced vitamin D3, and those are becoming available if you want to try that. But, go outside and make some vitamin D3 for yourself. But during the winter, that can be problematic. Now, especially with the current thing going on with, this coronavirus and whatnot, you really need to make sure your vitamin D levels are optimized because vitamin D is super important to protect against viral infections that are respiratory in nature, so like the flu and colds and things. Your vitamin D3 will stimulate the production of antimicrobial peptides in your lungs. So in order to optimize your immune function, you really need vitamin D3. And you can get this tested also annually, and hopefully you are getting it tested. And the optimal levels, in my opinion, are between 60 and 80 nanograms per milliliter. All right, so moving on, low-carb diets and keto diets. Now, these are super popular right now, especially the keto diet. Everyone remembers Atkins. That was really popular 20 years ago, and again, it was a popular 30 years ago. It keeps coming around. Atkins diet basically restricts carbohydrate intake, and there are different stages. It allows between 20 and 100 grams of carbohydrate per day. Fat and protein intakes are not limited, so you can eat as much as you want. And this diet does not restrict calorie intake. So basically, you just restrict carbohydrates and you cause your body to use more fat for making energy. The keto diet is similar, but a little bit different in that 75% of this diet is fat, 20% is protein, and 5% carbohydrate. There are no calorie restrictions in this diet either. The benefits of low-carb diets are these. It's efficient for weight loss. People tend to lose weight very quickly. And the weight loss is accomplished through fat oxidation. And through fat oxidation, you create these things called ketone bodies, which are alternate energy sources. So the body is really designed to run on glucose, especially the brain and the kidneys are two tissues that are optimal glucose users. They tend to want to use glucose for energy. And your body does prefer glucose as an energy source. But typically in most diets, glucose from carbohydrate is readily available, and your body can store a certain amount, like a day's worth of carbohydrate. But when you restrict severely carbohydrate intake, your body is forced to use fat or create glucose from your muscles. So we'll take muscle protein and create glucose. And some glucose is needed. So it will create some glucose from your muscle cells and release it into your bloodstream. But when that runs out, you use these things called ketone bodies. And the brain and the kidneys can use ketone bodies. Ketone bodies are like acetone and beta-hydroxybutyrate, and they're produced through fat burning. And it becomes an energy source that's readily available. This diet will also decrease appetite. So it's another benefit of low-carb diets. People really don't feel hungry. It does reduce the risk of metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome, as you know, it's a constellation of symptoms, which includes central adiposity, meaning you gain fat around your middle, right? And it's visceral fat, which is attaching to your internal organs. And that's a very dangerous type of fat, by the way. So you get that, and you get high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease is associated. You have decreased insulin sensitivity, diabetes. These are all parts of metabolic syndrome. So the low-carb diets increase insulin sensitivity, and they also decrease serum glucose, which is a good thing because high serum glucose levels leads to cardiovascular disease. Other benefits include the keto, especially for the keto diet. There's been some studies that people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, it will slow the progression of these diseases because glucose can add oxidative stress to the brain, and that will speed up the progression of Alzheimer's. It doesn't cure it, it doesn't make it go away, but these keto diets do seem to slow down the progression of these diseases. It has also been shown to be effective for medication-resistant seizure disorders, especially in children. But it can work in adults as well. So epilepsy, you go on a keto diet, and it seems to really decrease the number of seizures and the frequency of seizures. However, low-carb diets are hard to sustain for most people long-term because people tend to crave a lot of carbohydrates. People want their bread, they want their pasta, they want sugar. And that's natural. And they can also have a negative impact on the gut microbiome. The gut microbiome is just the variety and number of microorganisms in your gut, which have a huge impact on overall health. And we're just scratching the surface with this in the science that's being done right now. But in order to have a nice variety of gut microbes, you really need to eat a lot of fiber and animal products. Not just fiber, but also polyphenols tend to be prebiotic substances, meaning prebiotics feed the gut microbiotics, the gut microbes. And fiber does that too. So on low-carb diets, there's a tendency to not eat a lot of fiber because you're reducing the amount of plant foods you eat. If that means like starchy vegetables and things, because plant foods have carbohydrates. So you eat less carbohydrate, you're getting less fiber. Also, the increased animal products has a negative impact on the gut microbiome too, because it causes certain microbes to increase and others to decrease, and that balance imbalance can have negative effects on health. The strengths for low-carb diets is it's low in sugar and practically no processed foods, which is really good. It's high in fat, so it increases satiety. It makes you feel less hungry overall. Some weaknesses are that it's low in fruits and vegetables, so you don't get those phytonutrients. It's low in fiber, so you don't have any grains or plant foods, right? And it's high in fat. And different people will respond differently to this high-fat diet. There is a lot of evidence now that genetically people differ in their response to these high-fat diets. Some people do fine on them, and some people do not. So if you have 23andMe and you have the information, you can find the information on which single nucleotide pairs called SNPs that I know this is a little technical, but there are ways to figure out whether you're a responder or not. In fact, you can do genetic tests. There are services out there that can do that for you. And sometimes it's valuable if you're trying to choose a diet that's right for you. None of these diets is right for every person. And some people are going to do better than others. Okay, for nutritional support, obviously fiber supplements are going to be important. MCT oil. People use this a lot. I don't think it's like a necessary thing, but people use it a lot because it's a fat that helps you burn fat. It's metabolized differently than other fats. It goes to the liver and creates ketone bodies more readily than long-chain fatty acids, which are your typical fats and foods. people use a lot of MCT oil. Now, this can work if you just replace, it will help you lose weight if you replace your current dietary fats with MCT oil. If you're just adding MCT oil to your diet with all the other fats, it might backfire on you. Anyway, B complex, including choline, low-carb diets tend to be a little low in the B complex vitamins, certain ones, and it's not necessarily good to just supplement with one B vitamin or two, so typically we just recommend B complex and make sure you're getting enough choline because that's really important for the brain and for burning fat, by the way. The liver needs choline for fat metabolism. Vitamin E is typically found in plant food. So vitamin E is really important. Vitamin K, which is found in dairy and also in plant foods. So vitamin K1 in particular is mostly found in plants. And low-carb diets tend to be low in that. And antioxidants because of the low plant intake. Also, selenium, molybdenum. These are two minerals that are important. Selenium for glutathione production and other things, and in molybdenum. These come from the soil, so they definitely mostly come from plants. And molybdenum is super important for joint health. Calcium, magnesium. If you're not eating any dairy, you really need to get enough of that. And at first, people describe the syndrome when they go on these keto diets of what's called the quote-unquote keto flu, where they feel really, really bad. And that's because they're dumping a lot of water into and so you're losing a lot of electrolytes when you lose a lot of water in the beginning. So you need to sometimes supplement with electrolytes to make you feel a little bit better. But that's not necessary for the entire time you're on the low-carb diet. I mean, mostly you get a lot of sodium, potassium, magnesium from food, and if you're not getting enough, you can make sure that you can include those foods in your diet or supplement. Okay, moving on to the paleo diet. This is an interesting diet that was developed by a scientist who studied the people, indigenous populations in their diets, mainly like African bush people and people in Australia, hunter-gatherers societies. And the paleo diet is designed to resemble the diets of our pre-agriculture hunter-gatherer ancestors. So this is, thousands of years ago, before we had agriculture, the type of diet that they ate. And this would include lean meat, vegetables, fruits, seafood, nuts, and seeds. No grains, no beans, and no dairy. This diet, you do not count calories. Some benefits they have found in scientific studies have been improved glucose management. That means that you improve your glucose sensitivity and lower your hemoglobin A1C levels. So if you have lower your A1C, that means over time, your glucose levels are being managed a little better. You're not hitting as high highs as you were in the past. Paleo diet typically improves waist circumference, meaning you lose that visceral fat around your organs, so your waist gets smaller, which is a independent risk factor for heart disease, by the way, when you have all that fat around your middle. Improve blood pressure and improve lipid profile, so your cholesterol levels and your triglyceride levels usually improve. The research on this diet is limited. There's only been a few papers published, so just take it for what it is. The few papers that have been done, I think I found about 5 papers on it, and they were pretty consistent. So I do think it does help. And the reason is because there's no processed food in this diet. Processed food it kills people. It's really dangerous. And when you take that out of your diet's going to be naturally low in sugar. You're going to eat more real food that's going to be high in fiber because you eat a lot of plant food. On the paleo diet, you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. You don't have as many allergens, so there's no dairy, wheat, and the common allergens that you typically find. And this diet does improve the microbiota diversity, so it improves your gut flora. Some weaknesses. Okay, the paleo diet is an ideal that really can't be replicated with our current food supply. The food is just different now, so we have to make do with what's available. It may be difficult to sustain for some people. It's harder to eat out. There's no grains, so that's kind of a difficult thing. And some people just like, their grains, and it's such an embedded thing in our culture. It's hard to abstain from indefinitely for some people. Also, it's generally low in calcium because there's no dairy. So for support for the paleo diet, you want to make sure that you're getting enough calcium, magnesium. The complex can be a problem, iodine, even if you don't get enough seafood. This diet does include seafood, so if you're mindful of getting enough, especially shellfish, you get enough iodine with this diet. All right, Mediterranean diet. Now, this has been in the news a lot recently because there's been some big studies using the Mediterranean diet. Now, this diet is based on the traditional eating patterns of Italians and Greeks around 1960. Not now. This is circa 1960. This is the diet that was available 50, 60 years ago. 50 or 60 years ago. Their diet was high in fruits and vegetables. It was high in nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains, breads, herbs, and fresh herbs and spices, by the way, fresh herbs, spices, seafood, and extra virgin olive oil. Now, I put in here servings per day, 8 servings of extra virgin olive oil per day. That's 8 tablespoons of olive oil per day. Seems like a lot, right? They also had a lot of poultry, eggs, cheese, yogurt in moderation. So those 4 things in moderation. And they avoided sugar, processed meats, refined grains, refined oils, and other highly processed foods. Here's some benefits. It seems to be highly anti-inflammatory, and it reduces high sensitivity CRP levels. CRP is C-reactive protein. It's a marker for inflammation in the body. It's a highly sensitive marker, and it's an indication that you have inflammatory processes going on right then. And so this diet will quite quickly lower your CRP level. It seems to be anti-aging. There's a lot of phytonutrients, a lot of antioxidants in this diet. It's been shown to improve cognitive health, especially in the elderly. It lowers your risk for cardiovascular disease by lowering serum lipids and blood pressure. It lowers your risk for type 2 diabetes. It lowers overall cancer rates, especially GI cancers like colon cancer and stomach cancer. It improves the diversity of the microbiome, which is a good thing. Lowers. It also has a lower environmental impact, meaning it doesn't hurt the environment so much as, this big farming, these big cattle farms and things like that. It doesn't include a lot of meat. It's kind of meat is a minor aspect of the Mediterranean diet. One good thing about it is that it's good for everybody, all ages, old people, young people, middle-aged people. Everybody can benefit from the Mediterranean diet. And it's easy to sustain long-term because there's no severe restriction on grains and things that people have a hard time staying away from. Some things that might be low in the Mediterranean diet could be iron, because it doesn't include a lot of red meat. You have to get, again, your levels monitored for iron if you're taking iron. And also vitamin D, again, because, people don't get enough sunshine and don't get enough seafood and all of that. So very few things you actually have to supplement with when you are on the Mediterranean diet and you follow it pretty well. All right, let's talk about intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating. I find this the most interesting thing that I'm covering today, and it's sort of a new-ish idea in the mainstream, but it's been going on, and they've been doing experiments in animals for quite a long time, and they've done some studies that have some interesting results. So, intermittent fasting is an eating pattern that cycles between periods of fasting and eating. It doesn't specify any type of food you should eat, but it only says when you should eat. Okay, so you don't have to eat anything specific, but you have to eat it at a certain time. And I'll get into some different patterns in a bit. There's no overt effort to reduce calorie intake. And there are several common eating patterns that are associated with intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating. There's alternate day fasting, 5-2 pattern, and time-restricted eating, which is a specific thing. So, alternate day fasting and the 5-2 plan. Alternate day fasting is just what it says. It involves alternating fasting between one day and the next. One day you're eating, and one day you're not eating. So no energy-containing foods or beverages on your eating days, and however much you want to eat on your eating on those days when you eat. You can eat ad libitum, means you can eat as much as you want. There's no restriction. But on the days that you're not eating, you can't consume any energy-containing foods. So it's just like water. The 5-2 regimen involves severe energy restriction for 2 non-consecutive days per week, with ad libitum eating of the other 5 days. So you pick 2 days in the week and you don't eat anything, or you eat between, like, I think it's up to 500 calories per day. And the other 5 days, you eat whatever you want, whenever you want. Okay, time-restricted eating. There are some protocols that allow individuals to consume ad libitum energy intake within specific windows, and then periods of fasting on a routine basis. So every day you would eat only during an 8 to 11 hour window. So you would eat 8 hours during the day and you would fast the other 16 hours. Or you can do this up to 11 hours. You can eat and then, 13 hours you would be fasting. The best results for weight loss are when the eating period is early in the day. So I just saw a published study on this. It just got released, where they showed that people who ate, let's say you take your 8 hour window and you take your 8 hours of eating from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., these people lose way more weight than the people who want to eat from noon to 8 p.m. And this has to do with circadian rhythms. The body just handles food better. This is consistent with other studies that have been shown that people who eat breakfast are thinner. When you eat earlier in the day, it follows the body's natural circadian rhythms, and you actually use more calories. Even all things being equal, you could eat the same number of calories, but if you eat earlier in the day, you have better energy usage. Okay, so in general, just with any diet, eating at night will increase postprandial insulin response, meaning that when you eat at night, your insulin levels go up way more than if you ate the same exact food than you would during the day. So that curve where your blood sugar goes up and then your insulin response to that blood sugar going up gets way up. In fact, insulin production gets exaggerated, basically, if you're eating at night. That's why people who eat at night, shift workers and all of that, people who like their midnight snacks, have much higher risk of type 2 diabetes, because it messes up your body's insulin response. Because insulin, eating, the body's response to food is an endocrine response, and insulin is a hormone. So endocrine system is your hormone system. Insulin is a hormone. And the body's hormones are regulated by circadian rhythms. And when you don't follow your circadian rhythms, it's not healthy, right? So eating at night increases your postprandial insulin response. Insulin antagonizes melatonin, which is, melatonin is a very strong antioxidant, and it's what I say anti-neoplastic, meaning neoplasms are new growth, meaning cancer, right? Abnormal cell growth. Melatonin is it's a very strong antioxidant, and when you have higher levels, it helps to reduce cancer risk. Hopefully that makes sense. Some studies have confirmed that breakfast eaters are generally thinner than those who don't eat in the morning and eat heavily at night with equal calorie consumption. So with that said, I want to move on. Okay, so some benefits of intermittent fasting are metabolic disease, meaning diabetes and heart disease, are improved. So your insulin goes down and your A1C goes down. Blood pressure goes down. Your systemic inflammatory markers like your CRP go down. And interestingly, intermittent fasting increases BDNF. BDNF is a neurotropic factor, brain-derived neurotropic factor, and it is a hormone in the brain that increases synaptic plasticity, meaning it increases the ability for the brain cells to interact, and it increases the production of nerve cells. So it's very interesting that not eating at night especially increases BDNF, which will help you with cognitive function. And that's, I think, one of the most fascinating things about intermittent fasting. People with intermittent fasting diets, they have improved sleep and improved mood. Hunger goes down. Interesting, right? Because you're not eating on those days or during those periods of time. But people paradoxically are less hungry. And it decreases ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone. That's the thing that makes your stomach growl and feel that empty in your stomach. That's ghrelin. Intermittent fasting reduces the risk of cancer, probably due to better glycemic control and insulin control. Certain types of intermittent fasting are good for weight loss, others not so much. Like time-restricted eating, not so much. However, the 2-5 eating pattern and the alternate day fasting pattern do tend to stimulate weight loss. Some weaknesses of intermittent fasting. Ad libitum eating doesn't always include quality foods, and with some people, it can result in binging behavior. That's kind of a caution, because people who have eating disorders, this might not be the best plan, because severe restrictions can result in, binging. So benefits, some of these benefits will depend on your choices. So if you're just during the time when you're eating, if you're eating just junk food, it's not going to be as good as if you say, eat a Mediterranean diet choices like that. That would probably be the best of both worlds, right? Some people might not be able to sustain it due to intense hunger on fasting days, but also due to social constraints. Let's say you choose your time for optimal weight loss or weight, sustaining from 7 to 3, and you want to go out to dinner, then what are you going to do when your friends want to go out to dinner? You're not going to be able to eat, right, with everybody. So it can be socially difficult. So some support kind of depends on your food choices, but I would recommend a multivitamin and a B complex plus vitamin C on fasting days, because you have a limited storage capacity for B and C, B vitamins and C. So on fasting days, you're not getting those, so I would recommend that you would take those on fasting days. Otherwise, as long as your diet is pretty good, you don't need that many supplements. So just to summarize, and I want to just add some comments on my opinions on some of these diets. The Mediterranean diet seems to be most universally affected, and it seems to be healthy for anybody. It's very well studied. They've been studying it for many years, and they've been doing a lot of really large studies, and there's a lot of documented health benefits for Mediterranean diet. It can be used safely for all age groups. There seems to be no adverse effects from this diet at all. And it seems like in the scientific community, it's the most recommended diet. Vegetarian diets are also well studied. They have a lot of documented health benefits. They're ecologically and ethically friendly, but they can really be problematic if you don't know what you're doing and you don't pay attention to getting enough B12, getting enough omega-3 fats, getting enough iron, things like that. So if you're not filling in these holes in the diet, you could run into problems. And don't forget also, if you're not getting enough protein, you can't fuel your neurotransmitter production pathways. So tyrosine, tryptophan, you need to make, norepinephrine, ephrin, dopamine, all these things. And I've seen people severely restricted vegetarian diet that they get a little, it can affect mood if you're not getting enough of the right amino acids. So I think you have to be mindful of that. And it's just an observation of mine over the years. Paleo diet is somewhat gimmicky. It's based on an ideal that can't be attained with our present food supply. But it does steer people away from processed food, which I really like. There's a few scientific studies, and it could be lacking in some nutrients. I kind of like the paleo diet because I think that going back to the way our bodies were evolved to eat is not a bad thing. I think it could be, if you're careful and you make sure that you're getting enough foods. And some of the newer paleo offshoots do include a little dairy and a little beans, which I think improves the diet, because depending on if you can tolerate dairy or not, but it tends to improve the nutrient profile of the diet. So as long as you're not eating processed foods, I think and most diets are good if you're not eating processed foods. So let's talk about keto and low-carb diets. This is kind of, in my opinion, not a natural way to eat. Okay, so we're not evolved to eat this way. It's hard to sustain for a lot of people long term. However, if you want to lose weight, this is a really good way to lose weight. You lose weight fast. It has some positive impact on metabolic disease, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. And it has a lot of benefits for medication-resistant epilepsy. So there are people who have a lot of problems with seizure disorders, and no medications are helping them. And it seems like a keto diet is very effective for controlling that. The biggest problem is that they have numerous nutritional problems, and not the least of which is the low fiber and high fat. I think the main problem with this diet pattern is that it negatively affects the microbiome, and that has implications that are far-reaching with respect to whole body health. So making sure that if you're on a keto diet or a low carb diet, you're getting enough plant food. It's really super important. Intermittent fasting. It's being studied currently, and there's some published research in humans. They have shown improvements for metabolic disease. If it's done right, it can be really powerful for long-term health, especially for brain health, and I find this super interesting. Alternating eating and fasting can cause behavioral problems, and that's kind of a con or a pitfall. If people have eating disorders, I don't know. I don't know. That's not something that I've read about or have seen in the literature. It's just something that I'm speculating about based on experience and knowing people and what people with eating disorders can go through with when they restrict their diets. Also, intermittent fasting requires a lot of discipline, as do a lot of these diets. But I think in particular, it's really hard for some people to not eat over whole days or 16 hours per day. And this isn't great for quick weight loss. I mean, yeah, over time, if you do the 2-5 or the alternate day, you're going to lose weight because you're actually consuming less calories, even though you seem to be eating more on those eating days. But they've shown that over time you just eat less. So, but it's not fast, but it's it's kind of effective, and it's super good for metabolic problems like insulin and blood sugar. Well, that's all I have. And if you have any questions, please submit them, and I would be happy to answer them. I've included my email address. If you want any references, any studies that I've looked at, I haven't really put them in the slides, but I will provide you with any references if you want. Just email me. If you have any specific questions, you can email me as well. I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Amy, for an excellent presentation. As I was listening, it's just so important to know what you're doing. There's a lot of benefits, like you said, but I see it specifically from the standpoint of young people, my nieces, the girls mostly, who want to go on a diet. I've been there myself, been there, done that. And it's just so important to know what you're doing. I remember myself going on a vegetarian diet one time, and I thought, if I have to eat another salad, I'm just going to fall over because I didn't know what else to do. And go ahead.
I think that you have to take into account your personality too, because there are people who need a lot of variety in their diet and some people who don't care. Right? And I think, there's also differences in the way each person handles nutrients. And you don't really know that always unless you get genetic testing.
Right. And when even when I look at how these quote unquote diets have become so popular, and again, going back to the young people, that has been my experience, my daughters, well, I'm going to be a vegetarian. Well, why are you eating nothing but French fries? You have to have French fries are not a good choice for a vegetarian diet, So again, the information that you presented to just give the good, the bad, and the ugly about these different lifestyles, and that's really what it is. I myself have done it. I did vegan for about 8 months, and for getting my body back on track, it was probably one of the best things I could do. But like you said, I couldn't sustain it long term. And if you can have the mindset going in, to say, well, I just want to get my body back into balance, and then, begin to incorporate those different things. What do you think about that? What, like if you wanted to lose weight, you said I think it was the keto diet, you'll lose a lot of weight fast. And then just take that because we all need a little bit of encouragement. So if you do that for, a month or so, and stay with the mindset of not going all out and saying, okay, now I'm going to eat whatever I want because I lost the weight, but balance it, put that balance back in, eat a little bit of meat, eat a little bit of fish, and they all have in common vegetables, fruits and vegetables for the most part. But what do you think about doing something like that as far as, for a quick weight loss and then moving into a more balanced diet?
I, I think that's great. I think the main problem with that is that people crave carbohydrates so much that they, when they start eating it, they can't stop. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that happen, but if you can do that short term and then go back to a more healthier eating pattern right afterwards, I think that does work. I mean, if you need to lose weight quick, a keto diet is pretty effective. And yeah, I think you can go cycle on and off of these things. And, they have now these, a lot of people practice what they call flexitarian diet, eating patterns where sometimes you eat vegetarian and sometimes you have a little meat. And, I think I think that's good for people psychologically because then they don't feel deprived. And also, now they're coming, a lot of those buzzy things are like plant-based diet where most of your diet is plants, right? And you add some animal products in, 20%, right? 80% plants, 20% animal products, right? Or, some variation on that. So yeah, being a little more flexible, I think can be good for people. It depends on what your overall goal is. Some people can't afford to go off, their main eating plan, because of health problems like diabetes. That's why I like the Mediterranean diet so much because it pretty much includes everything that people like except sugar, right? And people can enjoy their food and there's no overt attempt to restrict calories, and it's full of, a variety of plant foods. And I think that is the key element, that variety of plant foods right there. I mean, after I've gone to certain conferences or even when I was working on this presentation, slides, I was like, wow, I need to make sure I'm getting more variety because I'm that person who will eat the same thing every day and I don't care. So even though I eat a salad every day, I make sure I put in different things into my salad and make sure I'm getting, like, over the course of a week, a lot of different vegetables, at least maybe 15 or 20 different vegetables, right? So I think the variety is super important, and making sure that, whatever you're doing, whatever diet plan you think, you go into this with your eyes open and say, okay, well, I know that I'm going to have these holes in my diet. I've got to make sure I'm proactive and get ahead of that so I don't develop any deficiency issues, maybe subclinical, but.
Yeah, and it's really the other key point is mindfulness. Sometimes we get into these diets like we cannot stray from them, but then we do because, like you said, we want grains. We naturally want carbohydrates. That's what our bodies are made of. And so then we overeat, and then we get into the cycle, which, again, been there, done that, of the yo-yo dieting, where you lose it, then you gain it, then you lose it, then you gain it. So I've done it all in my almost 60 years of life. And I would have to say that balance is my final analysis of what is really important. It's just balancing. And if you're going to go to a birthday party for your grandkid and you're going to eat a piece of cake, you're going to eat the piece of cake. It's okay. It's okay.
Right. It's not a moral failing, right? And you don't have to beat yourself up about it. It's just like, oh, okay. I'm going to go ahead and have this one pleasure, and then I'll move on with, I will continue on with what I was doing before. Right. I mean, I think that, so much of eating is psychological and so much of it is social. And I think it's really hard to find, like you said, balance. I used to joke around because, I'm a kind of a person of extremes. I say balance is that thing I notice when I'm when I'm moving from one extreme to the other, right? It's like that point. It's that point at the bottom of the pendulum that I'm passing when I'm going to the other extreme. But as you said, as I age, that pendulum just doesn't swing as far in each direction, right?
Right. And going back to our young people.
Yeah, young people, it's hard because I think you're just finding your way to be, what's right for you and all of that.
Well, we could go on and on.
It's good to get some input from somebody who knows what they're doing, right? And not get all your information from Google.
Right.
So,
And
nutritionists are good resources.
Right. And your presentation was, again, excellent information about the benefits and the nutritional deficiencies, because we do need to be careful with that too. I've, again, been there, done that, where my mood just went like I hated the world, because I was nutritionally deficient in certain nutrients from being on a raw diet or a vegan diet or whatever. And so you have to find what works best for you. And again, for me, balance, however, that said, I think I'm going to try the keto diet to just have maybe a quick 10 pounds to get me going. So,
you lose weight quick, and a lot of the initial weight loss is from water. So you got to be aware of that. And so that's why people get that. A lot of times that people get that keto flu because they're dumping so much water, and it pulls out a lot of electrolytes. So if you supplement with some electrolytes, you will feel a little bit better initially.
Okay.
Well, I think you also get the withdrawal from sugar too. The withdrawal from sugar is a biggie for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I was never a sugar person, and then once I hit my 50s, I'm like, so again, I know you made mention of hormones and things like that, and all that changes as we go through life, from childhood to senior adult, and all of a sudden I had this terrible craving for sugar. And again, I see it as my body just being out of balance. So because when it's balanced, I really don't crave anything. I just eat, What did they used to say? Eat to live, don't live to eat.
Right.
So getting proper and good nutrition. So, well, I thank you again. Excellent information. So this will be posted on our website, nowfoods.com/webinars, for those of you who want to listen to it again. And our next webinar will be on the third Thursday of June, which will be on the 18th. And I'm sorry, I don't know what's on the schedule, but it'll be good. So thank you again, Amy, and thank you everyone for joining us. And Amy was kind enough to leave her email address on the screen there. So if you have any questions, I'm sure she will be happy to answer. So thank you again, Amy, and thank you, everyone. See you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you.